wanted to start this week's video by wishing you all a very happy new year. This is the first video of 2022 and what a way to start the year. This week the CakesbyLynz YouTube channel hit 500,000 subscribers. That's 500,000 of you guys, and I just want to say a massive thank you to every single one of you. Whether you've watched one of my videos, whether you've watched a few, or whether you've watched the whole lot, thank you so much. I really couldn't do this without you, so thank you for watching the videos and supporting my channel. Now, to celebrate, I thought it would be really fun to make a YouTube themed celebration cake for this week's video tutorial. So I'm going to be showing you how to make this really fun party cake. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is prepare my sponge cakes. So I've baked 1.5 times my vanilla sponge cake recipe. I actually baked these cakes yesterday. I wrapped them in cling film and placed them into the fridge. Now I really love doing this as it just firms them up slightly to make it a lot easier to trim off the top and slice them into my layers. But once they come back to room temperature, they will go back to being nice and soft and fluffy. So this is going to give me a total of 6 layers for my cake. Now I will put a link to my vanilla sponge cake recipe in the description below the video, so you'll be able to find it there. But for the filling, I'm going to be using some white chocolate ganache. So I'm just going to start adding it between my layers, stacking up my cake. I will put a link in the description below to a video showing you how I make my white chocolate ganache. Now if you are new to cake decorating, ganache is a great alternative to using buttercream, and it's a lot firmer if you plan to cover your cake in fondant. I can then go in with a crumb coat around the outside. Now all this is going to do is just lock in any loose crumbs on the outside of my cake. Once I'm happy with how that's looking, I'm going to pop this in the fridge just for that ganache to firm up slightly so that we can add another coating. So my cake is ready to come out of the fridge, and I'm actually going to use some of my 6-inch acrylic discs to help me get nice smooth sides and a nice sharp edge on the top. Now I'm going to start by carefully lift my chilled cake into the center, and I'm going to add some ganache onto the top. So we want to get this nice and smooth. I can then take my acrylic disc and with that parchment paper facing down and using my scraping tool, I want to go around the edge, just making sure that those 2 plates line up. Once I'm happy with that, I can start covering my entire cake with that ganache. I can then go in, scraping off firstly any excess, so not pushing too hard before going around a few times, just getting that scraping tool closer and closer to the edges. Now, if you haven't used acrylic discs before, since I got these, I have loved using them to get nice smooth sides, and I will leave a link in the description below to a more detailed video where I go through everything about them. I can then pop this in the fridge to allow that ganache to firm up. Once my cake has firmed up in the fridge, I'm going to remove the acrylic disc from the top. I can then take off that parchment paper, and I'm just going to fix any areas just with a tiny bit of ganache. And lastly, I just want to remove my cake from the acrylic disc at the bottom, and it's then ready for me to cover in fondant. So I've just mixed a small amount of water with some icing sugar just to make a sticky glue. Because our cake has been in the fridge, that ganache is nice and solid. So if I was to put my fondant straight over the top, there would be nothing to stick the fondant to the cake. For my cake, I'm actually covering this in some white fondant. Now I want to roll my fondant out until it's around 5mm in thickness. I can then bring my cake back in and drape it over the top. Now you want to make sure that as soon as you drape it over the top, you're going around just pushing that fondant against the top of your cake, as this is where your cake will rip from. I can then work my way around. I'm just going to pull out those pleats, smoothing down that fondant against the side of my cake. I'm then going to trim off the excess around the bottom before going in with my paddle smoothers. First of all, just smoothing down those sides. If you do find you've got any air bubbles on the side, just pop that pin in and just smooth that down. I can then use the 2 smoothers together, just working my way around the cake to create a nice sharp edge. Once I'm happy, I'm gonna finally go in with my flexi smoothers just to really perfect the top edge. But for the board that the cake is gonna going to go on. I've actually got an 11-inch drum board, and this one just measures 1 centimetre in height. I'm going to be colouring this first of all with some fondant that I've just coloured in this really pale light pink colour. Now a really fun effect is I'm going to cover my board in some sprinkles. Here I've got some pink sprinkles by Happy Sprinkles, and these are called Pink Simplicity. Now I don't want to cover the part of my board where my cake is going to sit, so I'm going to start with my acrylic disc. I can then use my Dresden tool so I know where my cake is going to go. One thing that you will want to use is a baking tray that has just a lip on the side so we can catch any of our sprinkles that fall off of our board. I'm then going to use some edible glue, and I'm just going to do this in small sections, and I always find this looks so fun on a celebration cake. And I do have a discount code for Happy Sprinkles, which I will leave in the description below. So there we've got our board completely covered in our sprinkles. I'm then going to allow this a little bit of time to dry before I add a matching pink ribbon around the outside. I'm then going to add some of my chocolate ganache into the center of my board and just transfer my cake across. Okay, so now we've got our cake. The next thing to do is to create some decorations to go onto it. So first of all, I'm going to create some cake toppers. Now, sometimes when you want to add text onto your cakes, you might not have the perfect cutters. So what you can do is actually print out your letters from the computer and use this as a template. So what I've got here is a 500K using the Google font Luckiest Guy. I've then got my craft knife. I've got 4 cocktail sticks, and I'm going to be using some modelling paste. So this is actually the pasta model by Saracino, and I started off with white, and I've also coloured some of it using the raspberry by Colour Splash. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is just use some scissors and cut those letters out. For the text that I printed out, each letter is around 5.5 centimetres in height and around 3 centimetres in width. Now, if you didn't have any of the Saracino, you can also use fondant. If you are using fondant, I would add a tiny bit of Tylose powder just so it firms up a little bit more than fondant on its own. Or you can also use gum paste or a floral paste. Taking that white, I'm going to roll this out until it's around 2 millimeters in thickness. I'm then going to take my first number, just pushing it down just so it's not going to move as I cut that out. I can then use my craft knife and carefully go around the outside, go around the edge, just neatening that up. I've then got some of the darker pink, so I'm going to roll this out, but I'm going to make this slightly thicker than the white. So this needs to be around 4 millimeters in thickness. So we want our cake toppers to end up quite chunky so that they'll hold their shape. I'm then going to take some edible glue and just apply this to the back of my number 5. I then want to cut out my number 5, but leave a border of around 3 millimeters, or as much as you like, around the edge. Now, if you were adding these onto the front of your cake, you might not want to make them as thick. I'm making them quite thick as I want to add in a cocktail stick so that I can push them into the top of the cake. I'm going to pop the end into some edible glue and just push that into the pink section. So I'm just leaving around 1.5 inches at the bottom. So there we've got the first of our toppers, and you just want to leave this to one side just for that modelling paste to firm up so that it's not going to flop over. And you want to do exactly the same for the rest of your numbers and your letters. So this is a great way to add ages or names onto your cakes. So once we have all of our letters cut out, here we have 500 and the K. So I'm just going to leave these for them to firm up while we create the rest of our decorations. What YouTube cake could we complete without a logo? So I've got some of the red Saracino and a small amount of white. Now I want this to keep its shape, so I want it to be quite thick. So I'm going to roll it out until it's around 5 millimeters. And just like we did with the lettering, I've created just a small template. I'm just using my craft knife to cut that out, going around the outside, just neatening that up. Now, the last thing I need is the little triangle for the front. So I've got some white modelling paste, and I'm going to roll this one out quite thin. So it's around 1 to 2 millimeters. And I'm going to use a knife just to cut out a triangle. I've then got a small amount of edible glue that I'm just going to place on the back of my triangle, and I can stick this on the front of that red plaque. And that's going to give me my play button for on the front. On the cake, I want the stars to run all the way up. So I've got lots of different size star cutters. I've got some smaller plunger cutters. I've got these Peer Me star cutters and also some cookie cutters. I've also got some cocktail sticks. So for the larger ones that are going to go more towards the top of the cake, I'm just going to push these in on the sides. I've then got some of my Saracino modelling paste, and I've actually coloured this in a yellowy orangey colour. Now I'm going to be painting my stars with a gold lustre dust, so this just gives a nice base to apply that paint onto. I'm going to roll it quite thin to start with, and this is going to be for my smaller stars. So these are going to be stuck directly onto my cake. I'm then going to roll my modelling paste out just slightly thicker. So this is around 3 to 4 millimeters in thickness. And I can then take just some of the larger cutters. I'm going to use a cocktail stick and just push it into one of those points. This way we can have them coming out from the side of our cake. Once you've created a whole selection of your stars in the different sizes, I'm going to leave these so that they firm up slightly. I'm then going to use some of the metallic lustre dust in the colour Pure Gold by Sweet Sticks and add in some dip-in solution. So this is just going to create an edible paint. Now, if you didn't want to use a dip-in solution, I do have a video showing 6 different things that you can add to lustre dust to create an edible paint. I'm then going to use a paintbrush and just go in, just painting our stars. So I'm just doing this for all the stars, and I'm going to leave them for that lustre dust to dry. Now, a really fun thing to make for a celebration cake are streamers, and these are super easy to make. So I've got some of my modelling paste, then got some dowels. So these are just wooden dowels that measure around 1/2 centimetre in diameter. You could also use plastic ones or even the ends of your paintbrushes. I've then got a pizza cutter just to help me cut them out nice and easily. So I'll start with the red ones. So I'm just going to roll out my modelling paste. So it's quite thin, but I get quite a long strip. You can make these any length you like. So you can make shorter ones and longer ones. And you can make these out of fondant, gum paste, or modelling paste. You just want something that will keep its shape once it's hardened slightly. So I've rolled this out to around 1 to 2 millimeters. And I'm going to use my pizza cutter, or you can use a knife. And I'm just going to cut out some strips. And I want these to be around 7 millimeters in width. Once you've got your strips, I'm just going to cut the ends off. I can then take one of my dowels, and you just want to wind that round. When it gets to the length that you want, you can just trim that down. So we're just loosely winding these round, so when they dry, you can just slide out that dowel. Once you've got a few of those, I'm going to do some of the other ones in some other colours. Okay, so my streamers have been left for around an hour. Now, to get them off, all you want to do is just spin it around slightly until it loosens. You can then take that off, and there we have a little streamer. So I'm going to do that for all of them. And you just want to have left them, they've had enough time so that when you take them off, they're gonna keep their shape. Now with the orangey ones, I am gonna be painting these in gold in exactly the same way I did the stars. And that's just gonna give us this really pretty metallic gold streamer to match the stars on our cake. So now all of our decorations are ready. We can start adding them to our cake. So the first thing that I'm gonna start with are my cake toppers. I'm then going to use some edible glue just to attach my play button to the front of my cake. And you want to make sure that triangle is pointing in the right direction. I've then got all my streamers to go on the board. So first of all, I'm going to work out where I want them to go before sticking them down with some edible glue. Now I've got all of my stars, and I want them coming from the bottom, working their way up the cake and just around my toppers. So I'm going to be using some edible glue and just a small paintbrush. As we start getting to the top, I can start pushing in some of those stars that are on the cocktail sticks. So So here we have the finished cake, starting with these really fun sprinkles on the board. We've got streamers, we've then got stars running all the way up to the top of the cake, revealing this 500,000 cake topper. I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and I want to say again a massive thank you to every single one of you for watching my videos and for supporting the channel. It really does mean so much to me, and I couldn't do this journey without you. Now, if you did like this week's video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you're here and you haven't already subscribed, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can also hit the notification bell next to the subscribe button, and this will just alert you every time I upload a new video. So until next time, bye!